Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? What are we getting into today?
We are going to talk about a man who is called Michigan's Cannibal Killer. So, let's get into it. This is Season 3, Episode 9, Kevin Bacon.
Wait a minute. I'm going to stop you right off the bat. We're going to talk about a cannibal, and his name is Kevin Bacon?
No.
Are you for real? Are you pulling my chain?
No, it's like straight up. The victim is named Kevin Bacon.
You literally said that we're going to talk about the Michigan cannibal, and then you said Kevin Bacon, where he sounds like the tasty one and not the one that's eating people.
Exactly. Kevin Bacon is the victim of the story.
Oh, okay. Well, if your name is Bacon, I mean, I might have tasted you too. But that's a dangerous name.
It really is. It really is. So do you remember hearing about this back in 2019? Because initially when, it was breaking news and it said Kevin Bacon, so of course my mind goes to Kevin Bacon, the actor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's crazy. He's got the same name. His dad is named Carl, and he wanted a son where his name started with K, and so that's why he went with Kevin. But he does share the famous last name with the actor.
Yeah, same name, not just the last name, same name.
Yep, same exact name.
Bacon. Kevin Bacon does sound delicious, and the star Kevin Bacon, he is a little delicious morsel. So, all right. I didn't mean to hijack the whole story yet, so I'll let you get into it. I just wanted to point out the irony of the cannibal eating some bacon. I mean, enough.
It had to be done. All right. Mark Latunsky was born on March 28th, 1969. According to an article in MLive, Mark grew up on a farm in Morris, which is about 25 miles north of Swartz Creek and Flint, Michigan. Mark raised beef cattle, and he showed them in 4-H competitions as a young boy. He graduated in 1987 as the valedictorian. Science was where he excelled. I looked him up on LinkedIn, so here's his bio. Mark received a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Central Michigan University. He worked in the barrier resins division of the Dow Chemical Corporation in Midland, Michigan, characterizing the rates of decomposition of polymeric materials. He obtained a master's degree in chemistry from Iowa State University of Science and Technology while studying physical organic chemistry and the mechanisms of free radical processes. Mark embarked on industrial chemistry as a formulary chemist, developing environmentally friendly inks and coatings. As a research chemist for Flint Ink, he holds multiple patents for lithographic inks. In 2007, he joined American Chemical Technologies as their lab manager and focuses his technical efforts on all aspects of the tribology of biodegradable and fire-resistant lubricants. Mark worked for just over 11 years as a research chemist at Flint Group and just over 11 years as a lab manager at American Chemical Technologies Incorporated, ending his time there in February of 2019 and became self-employed as of March 2019. On the standardized IQ test, Mark scored 127, which puts his intelligence at very superior. So since I was looking up IQ scores, I started to wonder, what was Einstein's score? Well, his score was estimated to be around 160. And while we're at it, Stephen Hawking, the physicist, scored 160 as well. But with all of Mark's accomplishments, he stayed right here in the Mitten and actually moved back to Shiawassee County. Mark was single and 30 when his friend set him up on a date with a woman named Emily. For their first date, they had Chinese. Emily said, quote, "He was always a little bit awkward, but I liked him a lot. He was very considerate and kind. I fell in love with that side of him. He was always very gentle." The couple dated for approximately a year. They were married in 2001 and bought a 5-acre home on Tyrell Road in Bennington Township. The family raised goats, chicken, ducks, and rabbits, And just 2 years later, Emily gave birth to a son. They gave birth to 3 daughters as well, the last being born in 2010. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? Emily said that her husband was a loving father. They had a crazy busy life, but they were happy. It was 2010 when Emily started noticing some changes in her husband. She said, quote, he believed he wasn't actually his mother's son, but that he was his mother's brother, and that they were hiding that from him because there was some sort of family inheritance that he was going to inherit. But he had to do all the right things. He had to say all the right things. He believed that there were people watching him to make sure that he did that.
Okay, so are we trying to say that he's going a little bit cuckoo, getting a little paranoid, maybe a touch of schizophrenia? Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, he's starting to change a little bit. And I find that interesting because we've talked in the past about schizophrenia at length. That usually, right, it starts in boys, teenagers, like in their teenage years up into like their mid-20s. But he's way over 30. So I find that interesting.
That doesn't really matter. We talked about when it hits them the most with that family. We talked about that when we talked about the family. I think it was even in the round robin. That family of all the boys, and they all kind of went a little crazy. We touched on that and how all of them, when they got to a certain age, they were starting to show signs and symptoms. But schizophrenia can affect people throughout the whole life cycle. We normally hardly ever diagnose it younger than puberty. And when it's older than a certain age, we start to just call it dementia. It's all the same thing, right? The wires start to get a little crossed. Paranoia starts to set in. Anxiety rears up and races furiously. Every time we talk about all of the varying mental disorders, we talked about previously how they kind of really all overlap in varying degrees.
Yeah. Plus, I'm also wondering, this dude was working with some pretty heavy-duty chemicals. So I wonder about that.
Yeah, I didn't even really give that thought. I heard you say all that, but I really didn't give that any thought. But that is absolutely viable. But then, of course, because he's the Michigan cannibal, I'm thinking to myself, is he already being a cannibal? Like before he does before he finds the delicious bacon? Do we know, was he a cannibal or am I getting ahead of myself in the story?
As far as I know, no, he hasn't.
Okay, because cannibalism will disturb the mind. Cannibalism has been shown, especially in other animals. Thankfully, we don't have that many human subjects to get this data from. But in other animals, with other animals that eat their own kind, it drives them mad. Like everybody's heard of mad cow disease. And mad cow disease comes from cows eating other cows.
Yeah, I don't know. It makes you wonder, but there's nothing out there that he's killed before or that he's eaten anyone before. But who's to say? Who's to say?
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let you keep going with the story. See if we can get any morsels.
All right. Well, that was just the beginning. Mark's mental state was not improving, so Emily kept pushing, and finally Mark broke and agreed to see a doctor. He had left with a prescription in hand, and maybe he took a couple of pills, but that was really it. He was done with those. Finally, Mark confessed to his wife that he had not been faithful to her. He admitted to cheating online with men and meeting up with them for sex. Oh, God, talk about a freaking gut punch. How difficult would that be to hear from your husband? But Emily was willing to try to make things work, and I'm not sure why, girl. He is not into you. Off to marriage counseling they went. All the while, they were no longer sharing their marital bed.
He's not only a little bit paranoid and making up conspiracy theories about him not being his mother's child and some inheritance that, at least it sounded the way you were telling it, like it was all fictitious. Like his wife knew this to not be true.
No, she knew that wasn't true.
Okay, so he has, theories of grandeur. He's got delusions. He's got a little conspiracy factory of his own. And now he is bisexual or thinking that he may be gay because he is hooking up with other men that he randomly meets online. But then he also decided to blow up his marriage by telling her that. Not that I don't think he should have told her, but what I'm saying, he decided to blow up his marriage was because he decided to just blindside her with it without having a conversation to lead into it first. Do you know what I mean? Like he gut punched her with it. Like you said, that is a gut punch.
Yeah. I did read some bits and pieces in different articles that, he was always working late. And you know how it is when you discover for one reason or another your spouse has been cheating, then you start going back and you're like, oh yeah, makes sense. Makes sense, makes sense. He was always late. He was this and that. So
effectively, you could start putting the puzzle together. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. So Mark would accuse Emily of being a part of the conspiracy against the inheritance that didn't even exist. Over the next couple of years, things didn't get any better, and Mark actually was admitted to a psychiatric ward for treatment. But the straw that broke Emily's back was the moment Mark reported her to CPS for child neglect. Well, that was it. She took the kids, moved out, and filed for divorce in 2012. But after all the reported psychiatric history of Mark, he was still granted unsupervised visitation with his children.
Oh, hell to the no. If they were going mentally unstable, there is no way in hell my children would be with them unsupervised.
Agreed.
That is insane.
That's totally nuts. Right. So she moved out, filed for divorce 2012, and in 2013, Emily was losing her mind. It was Mark's time with the kids, but he never showed up with the kids when his time was over. She couldn't get a hold of him. She had no idea where he was or where her children were. Emily got the police involved immediately, and that's when they found out that Mark had taken the kids to some water park and simply refused to bring them back to Emily. So he was arrested and charged with kidnapping, which is a felony. Now, due to his mental history, the court had ordered a competency evaluation, of which he failed and was deemed incompetent, and the case was dismissed. A colleague of Mark said, quote, he just thought everyone was out to get him. Now, Mark did remarry in 2015, and this time to a man named Jamie Arnold. By September of 2019, they were separated. Jamie had left the home, which was the same home Mark lived in with Emily and the kids. Jamie said, quote, I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know it was to that extreme. He was progressively saying stranger and stranger things, like the neighbors were polluting our water supply. Now, I watched the 3-hour interrogation of Mark, and one of the things I heard him say was that the water in his house was not any good, and said that arsenic was in the water of a friend's apartment. Okay, so the background on Mark is that he's wicked intelligent, had a job making over 6 figures, and worked for years with some serious chemicals. He gets married, has a bunch of kids, but is cheating on his wife with men he randomly meets online. Mark's mental health is declining. He gets married to a man named Jamie, and after 4 years they separate, and Jamie moves out in September of 2019. So here's the litany of Mark's diagnoses. Severe chronic and major depression with psychotic features, adjustment disorder with depression, and paranoid schizophrenia, and borderline personality traits. So there's that. And he won't take medication. They don't like the way it makes them feel. Mutes them, so to speak. Right, Christine?
Yeah, a lot of them do complain about how they feel like they're living in black and white when they're on medication, or they feel heavy, like on those hangover days or those days post really heavy workout. Like you're kind of achy all over, you don't really want to move, and nothing really sparks.
Well, it's, they're taking the antipsychotics. I would imagine that it would almost be something like, how about when you wake up and your arm's completely asleep? You touch it, it feels weird, doesn't feel like you at all.
Yeah, that's a good way to talk about it too, where sounds are muted, noises are muted, colors are muted, and they just don't feel like themselves. Associate that with your whole body.
Yeah, it's kind of like this guy's living on a bipolar high when they're on the upswing.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's invigorating. They're go, go, go.
Yeah, but the thing is when schizophrenia gets to a point or borderline disorders get to a point, medication is definitely needed because that is essentially what it is misfiring of the brain.
Yeah.
You can't last long like that without medication, unfortunately.
Yep, agreed. So let's talk about this online app Mark uses to hook up with men. It's called Grindr. So if you don't know, quote, Grindr is a dating and meeting app predominantly used by gay and bisexual men and the trans and queer community. It uses your device's GPS to locate other users nearby and displays their profile pictures in a grid, ordered by their distance from you. Tapping on profile pictures opens the full profile where you can initiate a chat. I can only speculate as to why Jamie and Mark separated. Was it Mark's declining mental health? Could be. Was one of them cheating? Maybe. But that's really none of our business. But the fact is, someone with mental illness, multiple ones, has lost another person he loved. He's not working or at least leaving the house to work, so he's all alone and not taking any medications. And that right there is something that should frighten everyone. Well, Mark was looking for sex, and like so many, he fires up Grindr to find a hookup. One of the people he is chatting with is a man named James Carlson. He was a 48-year-old man from New York. Now, I read that James thought he was chatting with Jamie, Mark's ex, but it was really Mark. Now, I'm speculating that plans were made for Jamie to meet James at the bus station for some kinky fantasy sex, just like they had been planning. Within their exchanges, there was talk of fantasy, what they would do to one another, BDSM games, a special chamber just for him. Now, I just want to say something. I am not looking down on this lifestyle. If that's what you're both into, what does it matter to anyone else? And I'm sure you don't want anyone looking into your bedroom with your kinky shit. You know what I'm talking about. All right, moving on.
We're going to move away from that topic real quickly before we get into my time.
Oh, amen, sister. Moving on. On October 10th, 2019, James Carlson hopped on a bus to Michigan. Yeah, you heard that right. A freaking bus. That's a long ride. Now, here's what I kind of pieced together here. James thinks he's talking to Jamie. He makes this special long bus ride from New York to Michigan to see Jamie and play out the fantasies they've talked about in Carlson's torture room. And I say that because that was in their conversations with one another. From what I could gather in the documents I read, is that they talked at length about what they would do and having a sex chamber in or a part of the fantasy. So, James arrives at the bus station, but it wasn't Jamie that he saw. Later that night, 911 received a call. Quote, this is going to sound a little vague. I'm here in Detroit. I'm from New York, and I met this guy at the bus station who offered me a ride. And I'm not really sure where I am, but I broke out of his fucking basement and I need a ride. I'm in trouble. I couldn't find my way back to his place if I wanted to. Sweetheart, I need help. The 911 operator said, quote, okay, I'm going to get you help. Are you walking down the street right now? James said, yes, ma'am, I am. I don't know if he drugged me. I don't know. I woke up in this fucking basement, okay? Chained in the basement with a leather thing on my ankle, and I cut it with a butcher knife that I have in my fucking hand. Excuse my French. I met this guy. I'm bi, he's cute, he hit on me. I don't know, we went out to the car. We went to the store. We had a soda. I woke up in the basement. He obviously drugged me. The 911 operator said, quote, do you know what his name was? James said, no, and I don't want to pursue it. I want to go home. The operator said, quote, when I get a trooper close to you, I'm going to need you to put down that butcher knife. James said, quote, I'm flagging down whoever this is, so if it's that maniac, you're going to hear some crazy shit. I don't know. I think this is a cop because that looks like an extra bright light, so I'm putting this down. I am unarmed. It is on the guardrail. Once James saw it was an officer, he again made it clear that he was not armed. Feeling safe, James broke down and said, quote, "I'm just really happy to see you," through his tears. It was approximately 2:30 in the morning when the call was placed to 911. While talking to the police, James told them that he, quote, was a bisexual and a freak by his own description. After entering the kilt-wearing man's car at the bus station in Flint, he had fallen asleep. Quote, he remembered waking up with a leather strap tied around his ankle, which was also attached to a chain. James also said that he was in the basement with a small kitchen nearby, and this is where he was able to stretch and reach a kitchen knife to cut away his bindings. James was not able to describe the man's vehicle, or the home where he was taken and bound in the basement. He refused medical treatment, and he also was adamant about not pressing any charges. James said he was not held against his will and that he had gone with the man. Without James wanting to cooperate, there was nothing that could be done. But this wouldn't be the last call police would receive. Nope, there would be more. Police re-interviewed James a few months after Kevin's murder. He said that he was embarrassed of the situation the night he had called 911, and he didn't want his private life exposed, and that's the reason he didn't want to press any charges against Mark. It's now November 25th, 2019. Another call to 911 from another young man whose name has been redacted. He told the operator that he had escaped from a home on Tyrell Road in Shiawassee County in Bennington Township. It was approximately 5 p.m. when he had escaped. He, like James, had no idea where he was. In the police report, the officer had written, quote, the caller ran to 910 West Tyrell Road, only wearing a leather kilt with colored hair and painted fingernails and toenails. He was out of breath and said he was chased by a man that chained him. He said he was there to help a man move some tile. Later, they learned the man came to Mark's home for sex. Quote, it was learned that the other person was Mark Latunsky, and this was not the first time the two of these men had a sexual encounter together. When the police were able to pinpoint which home the man was in, they had gone to the home and knocked on the door. It was Mark Latunsky that answered. He, like the man who had escaped, was wearing only a leather kilt and suspenders. No socks, no shoes, no shirt. The man said he thought he was there to help a friend. Then the next thing he knew, Mark told him that he was going to chain him up in the basement and that he was not going to be leaving. The kilt that the man was wearing was not his, it was Mark's. And during the 911 call, the man was being chased by Mark. You could hear it in the recordings of how afraid he was. And I also saw a news clip of the neighbor describing to the reporters the experience of it. The house where the young man ran to for help answered the door. A man was begging for help, only wearing a leather kilt. Then some man runs up trying to get to the guy saying he wants his kilt back. Lucky for this guy, Mark gave him a bathroom break so he could escape.
Okay, can we just talk about these leather kilts? I'm sorry, every time you say black leather kilt, all of his victims escape, all the ones that have escaped in a similar, obviously not the same because they all escape with it, so they leave with it, but this black leather kilt. What is this guy's deal with black leather kilts, and why does he buy them in bulk?
Well, you know what? I don't know. Now, Latunsky, that sounds like a Polish guy. That when you look at pictures of him, like you can find his Facebook, you can find his LinkedIn. Of course, there's other pictures like, when he was married to his husband, Jamie, the two of them were in images where they're both wearing these leather kilts. So I don't know if he still had Jamie's kilt and this was part of his fantasy of maybe keeping Jamie with him in some weird way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he was definitely into the whole...
He had both of them, apparently.
Yeah, he had Jamie's. He's like, you're not leaving with that. That was $350.
That's hysterical.
All right, when the police arrived at Mark's place, he made it clear that he wanted his leather kilt back. The exchange happened. one black leather kilt for the man's clothes. Boom, done. But just like James, this man also did not want to press any charges. And here's the sad truth in both of these cases. Because these men were gay, neither of them wanted to press charges. Don't you find that incredibly sad? If you or I woke up chained in someone's basement and escaped, the cops are not asking me if I want them to investigate. These men just wanted to get away so that they wouldn't be humiliated for being gay or being made a spectacle. And the worst part of all of it is that the police just let it go. Again, wouldn't you have a little flicker as a cop and think, yo, dude, this is 2 times in 2 months, same scenario. Maybe we should start digging.
Yeah, that is very much in line with how we used to treat women back in the 70s from our last show. They didn't do enough to help her and to save her from the catastrophe that ultimately happened because they didn't use common sense in there's a pattern here. It's only going to get worse and we have a problem on our hands. So the whole thing about sexual assault in any way, shape, or form, or any kind of assault on any human being, their personal preferences, their gender, their way that they present themselves, none of that should come into the human rights of it all. And the fact that we had a predator on our hands, that now at least 2 human beings have pointed out the fact that there is something wrong with this other guy. We have 2 people having a problem, being chained up and drugged by another guy, by another human, and he's kind of copping to it, but banking on the fact that they're going to be mortified of their life choices because society deems them as not normal.
Right.
That's where the problem is.
Right.
The inequality of it all is the problem of it.
Okay, so the first 911 caller, they had no idea. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know the guy's name. He didn't know where he lived. None of that shit. Second 911 caller, they know now where this guy lives. They've been face to face with this guy. And it just drives me absolutely batshit fucking crazy that they never pursued it. Like,
Agreed.
I just can't.
Agreed. Absolutely agree.
Yep. All right. So now it's December 10th. 2019. We're stepping it up. Mark was placed under arrest, but it's not what you were thinking. No. He was overdue on child support, so they nabbed him on that. Now, I'm thinking this guy had a decent amount of money. He was a serious chemist with multiple patents, so I'm thinking he just paid and got out because it wasn't long before he was back in his home on Tyrell Road. A hit on Grindr. A third, but this man would not be the one to call for help. So who was he? Kevin Richard Bacon was born on November 28th, 1994, and he grew up in a small city named Swartz Creek in Genesee County, which is a suburb of Flint. Now, we talked about Flint when we did the Eliza Bulazam story back in Season 1, Episode 3, and Flint is a dangerous place. And as I mentioned previously, Flint made national headlines related to the water crisis there. Kevin was living in a small town, and I get it. I came from one here in the Mitten as well. If you don't fit the mold, you're looked down on. In 2019, Kevin was 25 years old. He was over 6 feet tall. He was a loving person, someone who just wanted to be loved. He was gay, and there wasn't much of a scene in Swartz Creek. Kevin was known for his ever-changing hair color, his kind heart, being a great friend, but he was dealing with a lot. He was bigger than the small town he lived in, and when you're in a small town and you are different, it's a real bitch. Kevin dealt with bouts of depression and would cut himself, and as most cutters do, they do it where you can't see it. If they are cutting their arms, they will always be wearing long sleeves. One of his close friends said that he had cut his forearm so badly one time that you couldn't even see any skin. And my heart breaks to hear that he was so tortured, and really for no good reason. It's old ideologies which poison forward thinking. Because let's be honest, It's only rising to the surface, okay? There have always, 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 always been gay men. And we can go all the way back to Roman times and probably even further back than that. So people just need to stop worrying about what others are doing and just love one another for who they are. Someone's sexual preferences have nothing to do with the human they are. Kevin wanted to move to Chicago where some of his friends had moved because, the scene for gay men was more acceptable versus small town Michigan. But Kevin wasn't so good with finances. He was working, of course, but I just think he was kind of frivolous with his money. He just couldn't save enough to make the move. He had at one point moved to the Upper Peninsula for a short period of time to get away, but up there is even smaller town, so that didn't work, and soon he was back home. It's now December 24th, Christmas Eve, 2019. Kevin had spent some of his day cutting and coloring his mother's and sister's hair in preparation for upcoming Christmas festivities. And I forgot to mention, Kevin worked at a hair salon, loved it, loved it, loved it. All right, so family get-togethers are in the works, and Kevin finds out that someone will be coming to a Christmas Eve dinner that he doesn't like. So he's like, nope, I'm not going. He pops open his Grindr app. There's someone close by. Kevin likes what he sees and says, quote, looking for any fun? Mark replies, always. You? But Mark wasn't going by his real name. He was using the name Alikos Kai Lucas. According to an MLive article, due to the Freedom of Information Act, MLive was able to obtain the interrogation video of Mark Latensky. And that's the one I watched that's online on YouTube. It's 3 hours long. According to the article, Mark told the police about what Kevin wanted for their upcoming meeting. Quote, Kevin was interested in being with multiple men, strangers, and being tied up in order to have a complete loss of control. Mark told him that he could do that for him. He also said that Kevin wanted to, quote, be taken naked and blindfolded and given to men for their use of him. Mark also explained to police that in order for the fantasy to be all he wanted it to be, that Kevin had to be in a fight or flight situation. Kevin said, quote, right, I need to be basically helpless, so I'd feel terrified. Mark told Kevin that he'd have to be blindfolded and taken to the place where he'll meet 5 men for sex. Quote, once the scene is over, you are returned. Kevin said, quote, now just one question. You are going to keep me safe, right? Mark said, quote, I will show you how I'm going to transport you and let you determine if I'm trustworthy. Kevin then said, quote, I'm hopping in the shower and I'll be ready. As Kevin leaves the house, he is captured on the Ring system camera, and this would be the last image of Kevin alive. Again, from the article in MLive, quote, once Kevin was in the vehicle with Mark, he then pulled out a bag of fetish devices, harnesses, and restraints. He wanted Kevin to look through everything and choose what he wanted. Quote, he looked at the Y harness, but it wasn't the right size. He put on the earmuffs and blinders, and because he was going to an auction, which was part of his fantasy, he also put on the leather wrist and ankle straps. But before Kevin gave all of his belongings to Mark to put in his car, he asked Mark if it was okay if he sent a quick text to his sister before the events of the evening kicked off. Mark, of course, agreed he should. Kevin's text said, quote, I'm going to be out for a while, actually. This is going to be fun. He's inviting more men. Merry Dickmas. I'm not sure when I'll be back. Probably will be out late. It's now Christmas morning, and Kevin never showed up for breakfast with the family. Something wasn't right. He would never miss this. The family learned from his roommate that Kevin had a date on Christmas Eve. The police were contacted, and missing person posters were hung. They were able to ping Kevin's phone and located it on December 27th of 2019. But here's what they found. Kevin's car And in the back seat was a bag that contained clothes he was wearing, his phone, his wallet, and basically everything that Kevin had had with him. Like he had just abandoned himself. Luckily, the battery was still going and the apps that Kevin was on were still open. They could see he had sent a text to his sister that said, quote, "It's going to be a very late night. If mom calls, tell her I'm sleeping. Ha ha." They saw another app that was open. The app that was open was Grindr. Call it happy accident because they could see the last conversations Kevin was having. They contained the context of the chats between Kevin and Mark, but also who the person was, but even better, the location. But Mark wasn't using his name. He was going by that Olikos Kai Lucas. Well, they found him. Mark was as casual and relaxed as could be when he answered the door. The police wanted to enter the home and take a look around, and he was like, "Oh yeah, of course, come on in." As the home's main floor was searched, nothing was found. So next, police headed down into the basement. Behind a sliding barn door, there he was. It was Kevin. He was hanging from the ceiling by his feet with chains. You see, there was a chamber fashioned by Mark, and even perhaps Mark and his husband Jamie, as they were into the BDSM lifestyle. According to Jamie, he just couldn't keep up with Mark. Who knows? I mean, this could have been their playroom as well. And if you recall, this playroom was also talked about with that first 911 caller from New York. I can't imagine Mark built this thing on his own in 1 month, but who knows? Now keep in mind that Jamie had left in September of 2019. So we have an issue in October, November, and now December. So he is spinning out of control. Needless to say, when police confront Mark about the discovery of Kevin in the basement, he's like, "Yep, I did it." No excuses whatsoever. Calm as a cucumber. Well, that was it. Cuffs are on, and he was placed under arrest and taken into the police station. During the interrogation at the police station, Mark was very calm and very matter-of-fact about the events in the basement's torture chamber with Kevin. Mark had on what looked to be a dark green or black kilt, a maroon long-sleeve sweater, long shaggy beard, the size of his head cut short, but the top of his head had long hair which he had in Viking braids. He spoke softly and seemed at ease while giving the police every detail he could think of, and more. Mark said that Kevin was very clear that he wanted to have sex, that he wanted to fulfill his fantasy, and at the end of the night, he wanted to die. He also told Mark that he did not want to be alone when he dies, and that he wanted Mark to kill him and eat him. During his interrogation, he was very explicit in the details. He said that they had met in a parking lot. Mark was driving a van. Kevin was in the back of the van as they were discussing how the night would play out. That Kevin was adamant about his fantasies and that he wanted to end the night with his death. The way Mark explained it, they had spent a lot of time in the van in the parking lot talking about how the night would go. Mark wanted to make sure that Kevin was 100% in and clear on what he wanted. Now that Kevin was fully committed to the journey, Mark then put all of Kevin's things into the backseat of Kevin's car. Now again, please remember that this is Mark's account of the night. Mark drove Kevin to his home. They hung out in the kitchen for a little, then down into the basement, into the chamber. Both of them were naked, and according to Mark, the two of them had sex. Then they laid together on the floor of the chamber. Then it was time. Time for the final act of the evening. Mark said that Kevin wanted him to stab him in the back of the neck so that death would come quickly and painless. So that's exactly what Mark did. Now, in some of the documents I read, it said Kevin was stabbed in the back. Others say the neck. And from watching the interrogation video, it's clear to me that Kevin was stabbed in the back of his neck as Mark was demonstrating and pointing to the back of his neck to show police where he had stabbed Kevin. Maybe he was thinking that would sever the spinal cord, paralyzing him, and then he would pass. But Mark felt that Kevin was lingering and didn't want him to suffer. So Mark then slit Kevin's throat to speed things along. He then hoisted Kevin up with chains from the bindings he placed around his ankles. This would allow the blood to drain from Kevin's body. Now, Mark made the parallel that it's the same thing you would do if you were processing a deer during his interrogation. Now, there was a wooden hatch in the floor, and under that was dirt. According to Mark, this dirt was to absorb the blood, and Mark's intention was to take the blood-soaked dirt and use it to fertilize his yard. He had also intended to use other parts of Kevin's body as well for this purpose. Next, it was time to follow through with what Mark said were Kevin's wishes. He needed to eat Kevin. Mark then sliced open Kevin's scrotum and removed his testicles. He then proceeded to the kitchen in order to prepare, cook, and eat. During his interrogation, Mark had said that he eats Rocky Mountain oysters all the time. In fact, he currently had some in his freezer. He went on to explain that you slice the testicles into thin slices, then you saute them in Worcestershire and butter. And that's exactly how he prepared them. And when he was asked by the officers if he ate them, he said he had. Mark had other plans for the meat of Kevin's body. During their conversations prior to heading to Mark's home, it was decided that Mark should buy a dehydrator to make jerky with Kevin so that nothing would go to waste. During the investigation, the dehydrator had arrived, so police had confiscated that as well. When Mark had gone to bed after the long night with Kevin, he looked down at himself. He was still naked with blood all over him. He thought he should wash up, but then decided against that. So, bloody and tired, he just went to bed. When he woke up later, he had made plans with friends to have dinner. Now remember, this is Christmas Day. Here's what's even more crazy, is that when Mark went out to meet his friends for dinner, dried blood was still on him. Now, during the interrogation, Mark never made any comments as to, whether his friends commented on the blood on him. So, I don't know what that's all about. Could it have been all in his head that he didn't wash? I'm not certain.
Did they ever talk to any friends that went to dinner with him?
Not that I came across.
Maybe the friends going to dinner was a fantasy in and of itself.
I don't know. I didn't see any other investigation that went on looking for these friends. Mark wanted to plead guilty, but his attorney advised against it initially. She actually thought that they had a good chance at being found not guilty, which is I'm like, what? Maybe hoping she could get him second degree with a chance of parole. But as the time was drawing closer to a trial, Mark told his attorney and the court that he did not want to go through a trial and that he was going to plead guilty. So that's what he did. Regarding the mental state of Mark, he again went through testing but was deemed competent by the judge to proceed and to make that decision for himself. Mark is serving a life sentence for first-degree murder of Kevin Bacon. And I remember when I first heard of this hitting the news, I was like, wait, Kevin Bacon, the actor? And I think his name being what it was also drew a hell of a lot more attention to this story. The actor Kevin Bacon also posted a nice post for Kevin on his Instagram page. According to an article I read from People magazine, this is what he said, quote, "For obvious reasons, I'm thinking this morning about the friends and family of this young person named Kevin Bacon. His life was taken from him much too soon. His love was hairdressing. I bet he would have done a great job on this mess on my head. Rest in peace, KB." Makeup mogul and YouTuber Jeffree Star also mourned the loss for Kevin on his Twitter feed. Jeffree mentioned that Kevin was a fan of his as well. He said, quote, "Rest in peace, Kevin. I'm devastated to hear of the passing of someone from Michigan who lived their life fearlessly and was taken too soon. Please help his family in this horrible time." So Jeffree's sister had started a GoFundMe page, and so on this Twitter feed, Jeffree did request that people donate. Please help his family, right? Donate to the GoFundMe. And on top of asking his fans to donate, Jeffree also himself donated $20,000. That's pretty cool. Now, Personally, I don't buy the whole story that Mark told. I do not believe that Kevin wanted to die that Christmas Eve. Yes, he had suffered from depression. Yes, he had tried to harm himself in the past. But around the time of the murder, he never said to anyone that, like he had in the past, that he was feeling like he wanted to hurt himself. He didn't want to hurt himself at this time. Kevin was just up for a good time. Now, I'll end this story with something from Carl Bacon, Kevin's father. This is what he said of his son, quote, "He was a kind-hearted person who enjoyed his life and his work. He was a very good hairstylist. He had a natural talent for it. He was a very joyful person, a very sociable person, and everybody who knew him enjoyed being around him. He will be greatly missed, not only by us, but by all his friends and family." End quote.
It just sounds like he was just the one that didn't get away. Because I think that this guy was just really losing his mind. And when you were talking about how his lawyer thought that she was going to be able to get him off, I bet she was thinking that because previously in the courts, he was deemed incompetent. So maybe she was hoping for a mental illness, get out of jail free for him. But I'm glad they didn't go that route. The mental health care system was not doing justice for him or anyone around him. So unfortunately, the penal system was the only way to go for him.
Yeah, it's truly sad, and I think I'm not going to say there weren't bits of truth in there, meaning he was up for some fun, crazy stuff. Maybe he did want to be blindfolded. Maybe he did want to have sex with multiple men because he made a comment in the text to his roommate that there were going to be multiple men. Remember, Mary Dick Miss. So I think there are bits of truth in there. I really, truly don't feel that he wanted to die that night. And I think the reason why Mark was successful in killing Kevin was because of the whole fantasy, the whole ruse, right? He's going to be blindfolded, like the whole 9 yards. So he had basically taken away a couple of senses of Kevin's, right?
I completely agree with you. I don't think that Kevin wanted to die. I think Kevin was looking for a wild and crazy night, and he thought he found somebody that was going to be just as wild and crazy. Only unfortunately, which is most often the case, that everyone on Grindr and any other app like it should be aware that there are crazy people out there like this, and that you can't trust people like that. And that sometimes fantasies are better left fantasies.
Yeah, you are taking a huge safety risk out there, guys. These are straight up strangers. Straight up strangers where you're going to hook up with, and you are going to be in your most vulnerable position ever. And I know guys are using the app. I know they're still going to use it. Just be careful. Just be real careful.
Yeah, people gotta be aware of their surroundings and maybe not willingly let go of your senses like that. I mean, unfortunately, Kevin's fantasies were leading him down a path of way too much vulnerability, especially at the hands of a complete stranger. And in this case, a mentally ill stranger.
Yeah.
It's a horrible story. It's really sad. I do also want to point out that the previous victims, I'm sorry that these men made choices not to press charges because of their shame or their embarrassment of their choices and their lifestyles. That hurts my heart for them. And I hope that we as a society open our minds a little bit and treat humans like humans, no matter what their preference in whatever way, shape, or form, so we can stop crazy people from being serial killers. Because if either one of those two previous 911 calls pressed charges, Kevin would still be with us, probably, most likely.
I absolutely agree. So, with that, everyone, we're going to end the story. Please be careful out there. And everybody, just love everybody. It's kind of a theme we've got going. Love everyone, be kind to everyone, accept everyone. Everybody have a great rest of your week, and we will see you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
See you next time.
Bye.